2012, I came across a gentleman by the name of John Walden. I went to one of his conferences, and he started telling me about what's happening in the United States. He spoke about biotechnology, he spoke about technology, and he spoke about great global themes happening in the world. Apologies. And I started getting very interested in this. Why, what, how, where can South Africans invest in these? And to my amazement, I found you can't. We're a commodity-producing country, lots of retailers, lots of banks, and they've done well. But there was something going on in the United States which we were not part of as an investor. So at Brentis, I then started going around asking for overseas fund managers, can we get access to your funds, Templetons and the Fidelities and the Vanguards? Because that's what the market was doing. The market in the US had been running for a couple of years, and it kept on running. Year after year, it just accelerated, and it was very obvious to see what was happening. That's where you had to put your money. So that didn't make me very popular with the fund manager. If I said on radio or in print, I think you must take some of your money offshore. And here are the reasons. Nothing to do with politics. We get into politics. I said, it was said, and it was very apparent, global market was booming. The S&P 500, as we now know, looking back in time, was a phenomenal place to be with your money. So the African fund managers did not have the capability of managing money in a global market. Since then, that has changed. This morning on my email, I got 91 has got a conference on offshore. Coronation got a conference on offshore. They're selling new products. Sectrix yesterday announced a new fund that takes money offshore. So my comment on this was, you guys are 10 years too late. This should have been happening. But remember, fund management business is a business. You run and you sell what you have in stock. And I often think, try and analyze why people fall for these scams. And apart from the high returns that they offered, but the returns were not that high relative to what you could have got in the market. But I think they were whispering into the ears of their clients that this is tax-free money. We don't report to SARS. And I think that's where they hooked the investors to come and put money. And people would, look at you and say, well, we don't pay tax on those investors because it's a trust and the usual spin story. So and I think the tax angle was one of the reasons why people stood in a queue to hand over their money to these players. Now, the BHI Trust was run by Craig Warriner. He's in jail at the moment. And then Michael Aldane and Mauro Follen were very prominent financial advisors, they were appearing on all media all the time in various outlets, advertising, very aggressive advertising, and they had a big business. But behind the scenes, we know that they were naughty guys, and the FECI rightly stepped up and slapped them with a big fine, and of course, there's still criminal proceedings on its way.
Well,
but
Magnus, sorry, continue.
What's interesting is that the FECI is also been very, very active the past year. I mean, they've debarred 156 people from the industry, which is a record high. Articles. Slowly but surely, we seem to be stabilizing if one looks at the vital indicators of the economy. It's like you're lying in the ICU and you're strapped up to all these machines. And some of these indicators are starting to improve. Let me start with the more
Yes, I just want to ask you, what are the positive signs that you are seeing right now as you track these economic indicators?
Well, first of all, the Eskom situation, we were all cynical that they're going to sort it out for a short term before the election, but we've had 104 days without blackouts countrywide, and in the middle of a very, very cold winter. So something is happening at Eskom, and I don't fully understand what they've done, and one needs to analyze it in greater detail, but it would seem to be maintenance is taking care of some of the problems. You've had Casidio that's come online. Kubik is coming online next year. Plus, you've also had massive investment by the private sector and private individuals who've gone off the grid. They're supplying their own electricity. And then, of course, a very poor demand from the mining industry. So yes, let's take that as a win. It's good news for small businesses, medium businesses. That's a very good indicator. Other indicators are the budget deficits are starting to come down. We actually had a first budget surplus, excluding interest costs, in 15 years. One has to acknowledge that is an improvement. And then lastly, if you look at some of the politicians who found themselves in court on various fraud charges, the speaker has got, that surprised a lot of people that there has been some a movement on nailing some of the criminals who've been in our government. We, of course, was also saying we want more. And then, of course, you have there seems to be a leveling of confidence. The general election was peaceful. The ANC didn't tie up with one of the radical left parties. So, and I'm not saying it's going to turn around dramatically, but one has to acknowledge when there are good, positive signs in the economy. And that was just the thrust of my article.
So with this turnaround now apparently starting after we practically hit rock bottom, are you adjusting the investment advice that you are giving at the moment?
Well, that's the big question everybody's asking. First of all, they say, am I going to bring back all the money I took offshore for my clients? No, the answer is no. Those clients will not bring their money back unless they need it to live in South Africa, because A, it is already offshore, and B, the returns have been phenomenal. I mean, the S&P 500, NASDAQ, even the MSCI World Indices are at record levels. I mean, today... Predictions are always fraught with dangers, and one makes them reluctantly. And, I don't have any firm and fast predictions. All I can do is I think that there are certain trends that have been evident in our local market for quite some time, and I think those trends will continue. And the trends are the outflow of capital. I think the trend is lack of confidence in the government, in its economic policies. And I think also that South African investors have really woken up to the fact that they need to externalize their assets to a large extent, because the other investment markets are not offering them fantastic returns. So, and then you've got the two big players in the world markets, the USA. How long will that last? And I think that will last for a long time. So if you're looking for growth, you need to look at the US economy. I think Warren Buffett made it very, very clearly over many years. It says, do not go short on America. And also his comments about Japan. Japan quietly has been a very good place to put your money. And at Branches, we've been doing that for quite some time. And in fact, over the last 6 months, returns from some of our Japanese funds have beaten the S&P 500. So I think there's no question that any investor listening to this needs to look at a global allocation. I think the rand can weaken a lot more depending on what happens in our budget. We've all got these grandiose schemes by the government about the national health insurance, basic income grant, but the election coming up. We've got the plans of smart cities and bullet trains. That's not going away. But we're broke as a country. We just don't have enough money. I mean, we can't even sort out our current railway mess. Our roads are falling apart. So, you have to be very realistic, and it's not an unpatriotic thing. It's got nothing to do with patriotism and loyalty to your country. It's a fact of life. I always say to people when they argue about patriotism, I said, what airline do you fly when you fly overseas? And they say, well, of course, I fly with Virgin or BA or Lufthansa. And I say, well, why don't you fly with USA? Oh, no. We'll never fly with USA. expensive and unreliable, blah, blah, blah. So you see the point. Investment is a global game today. It's got nothing to do with the country. Same with the damage that has been done to the economy, personal balance sheets, mood of the country is enormous. And it's going to take a while. And we're not talking weeks or months, we're talking years to rebuild those balance sheets in the form of better stock market performance, which filters through into personal balance sheets, better improvement from pension funds, and then also property values, which needs to recover for most people outside of the Western Cape. Because if you look at that, that's been, pardon me, that's been an immense disaster. And it's one of the reasons why there's a study quite recently by Virtual Capitalists that shows that in the last 10 years, South Africa was one of the countries with the slowest growth in wealth measured in dollar terms. In fact, it was almost lost. It was slightly positive over 10 years, but way down the fast-growing countries like Kazakhstan, believe it or not, China, and all the other countries, United States, Holland, etc. And we were still positive, but, the economy needs to rebuild balance sheets, but more importantly, the individual investors need to rebuild. And let's hope that this is the start. We've seen it in the drop in interest rate. It's a beginning. But I think the real change will come, and that's what I'm watching as part of my job, is to look at, are the foreigners buying our stocks? And unfortunately, not enough evidence yet to prove that it's going to be sustainable. We're still on a grey list. We still downgraded. But if they come for South Africa, you will see it in the currency and also in the stock market.